Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Sunday, September the 5th, 2021. It is currently 3:55 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, located right here in the middle of nowhere, Texas. An empty sanctuary in the middle of nowhere. That's the headquarters for the Theology Central Podcast, right? An empty sanctuary in the middle of nowhere for a pretty well unknown podcast. Maybe that all should tell me something. You're in an empty sanctuary, sitting in the middle of nowhere. This is where life has brought you, right? To nowhere, to nothing. No, I don't like to look at it from that vantage point. I like to look at it that, yes, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Yes, I'm inside an empty sanctuary. But because of technology, I have the ability to just walk right over here, push a button, and then I'm live on the internet, and people can hear me anywhere around the world. Anywhere that anyone has an internet connection, they can literally tune in to me speak into this microphone from the middle of nowhere. There was a time that the only way you could be heard speaking into a microphone is, well, you'd have to find a radio station and you would have to get a job. And then you could only say what they would let you say. But now with the ability to do live podcasting, not just record a podcast, I can go live at any time, morning, afternoon, evening, at night, technology. And we can talk about immediately respond to what's happening in the world. We can talk about anything. We can do Bible studies, anything. And that's an amazing benefit of the technology we have available to us. And I want to emphasize the positive aspects of technology because we're going to be asking ourselves a very important question here. Is technology a device of Satan? Now, it's a play on words because a technological device, and it's a play on words because I'm borrowing from 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. Is technology one of Satan's devices? A technological device, Satan's devices? Yeah, I'm trying to be a little clever. You probably won't be that impressed. You probably won't think it's that interesting. And if you didn't hear that, that was thunder outside. So we have a thunderstorm kind of nearby. I don't think it's going to be anything big, but to the listener who sent us a power backup, I guess we're going to find out here in a few minutes, because if it starts raining here, the power will go out. We're going to find out if your equipment's going to work. Okay, we may get to test it right here, but that's a technological advancement right there. So that's a technological device that's supposed to back up, to keep everything operating for me to keep broadcasting live even if the power goes off. So see, that's a technological device. But if you think about right here, you can't see. To my left is a laptop, technological device, connected to the internet, technological advancement, speaking into a USB microphone, right? I don't need some major, equipment and microphone setup. This is just a USB microphone that literally just plugs into the USB port here of the laptop. That's all it is. It's a $100 microphone? There it is. Right here next to me is an iPad. Right here next to the iPad is, you can't hear it, it's an iPhone. Over there in my bag, you can't see down, is a Kindle. I have all of this technology all around me. And if you're listening to me, you're listening to me on a technological device, right? You're probably listening to me on your iPhone we do allow people using Android devices to listen. I'm debating whether we should do that, but because of grace and mercy, I'm joking. So people are listening to us via their phones, maybe a computer. Who knows? But this all involves technology. But is technology a device of Satan? Is Satan utilizing technology to literally hurt Christians, hurt our spiritual growth, destroy Christians' lives, destroy us spiritually, and to destroy the church? Is Satan using technology? Is Satan behind it? Now, we got to ask ourselves a couple of questions here, all right? And the reason we're talking about this, I've got an audio clip here. I don't know how long. It's a 55-minute audio, so it's more than a clip. It's a radio program. Here's what happened. When I got in the car to drive home from church, I turned on Christian radio, and I'm like, oh, this is an interesting topic. So when I get back to church this afternoon/evening, we're going to talk about it. So I grabbed the audio, and we're going to be talking about it. But before we get there, there's a couple of things we have to do here, all right? First, sometimes when someone turns on a microphone or is on radio, TV, or they write an article or they write a book, and they're writing the book or in the podcast or in the documentary, whatever, and if they're basically issuing a warning going, hey, this is going to destroy this generation is being destroyed, this is all bad. Typically, the people offering the warning is usually an older generation warning a younger generation that, hey, that's going to destroy you. That's going to destroy you. Like when you go back to the birth of rock and roll, right? Going back to the birth of rock and roll. And then, if we go back to the birth of rock and roll as far as it entered into the more mainstream, to the mainstream world. In other words, Elvis Presley kind of took what was already there and then brought it out and made it more popular. We can get into a whole discussion of the origins of rock and roll, but we won't go through a music history class right now. But when Elvis Presley brought it to the mainstream world, to the average white kid, listening to the radio, the older generation was like, this is the end. This is the end. Rock and roll is going to create juvenile delinquents. And you've probably seen documentaries where the person is sitting on the radio going, we're not going to play the devil's music. And then they break they have the little 45, for those who remember record players and turntables, and smashing it, going, this is horrible. And it was like, it's the end, it's the end, it's the end, it's the end. It's going to destroy us all. And because it was the older generation, something new, something different was emerging, and the older generation was like, it's going to destroy us all. It's the end, it's the end, it's the end. And then you can go from every generation, and my generation, right, going to the 80s, guess heavy metal. Oh, that's the end. It's the Satan's tools. It's gonna trap the entire generation. Is gonna be Satan worshipers, and we're gonna be drinking the blood of bats, and who knows, and these records have satanic messages backwards, and they're infiltrating the minds, and they're gonna control it. All of the warnings, and that it was the end, and the mark of the beast, and Satan was taken over, and then we were told in the 80s that there was basically gangs of Satanists roaming about seeking to kidnap you on Halloween and offer you as a sacrifice. It was crazy in the 80s. We were told that, especially here in certain parts of West Texas, dancing was, the devil's business, and you shouldn't be dancing, and rock and roll. And MTV was going to be the downfall of us all. And MTV was going to destroy our brains, destroy our minds. It was going to destroy. It was the end. The world could not make it past MTV. MTV was the end of civilization. And then then obviously video games were everywhere. Video games were going to destroy us. All of the warnings. In the 90s, Marilyn Manson was going to destroy us. And it was this and it was that. Back in the 1990s, listening to the Prophecy Club, the government was about to take us all over. All of the warnings, 2000s. I mean, it seems like every 10 years, there's this new threat. And it's always the older generation going, look. That's it. That's going to take us down, take us down. So we always have to look at things and warnings, at least in that context. How many times have you been warned that this is the end? This is going to take us down. And really not much arises from it. Right? So let's keep that in mind. That's number one. Sometimes I think the warnings are more about generational differences than it is anything else. The older generation, when new things arise, they just start yelling at it and saying, basically, get off my lawn. Old people like, I don't understand it. I don't know anything about it. It's not the way we used to do it back in my day. Back in my day, everything was wonderful. Back in my day, we were more moral. We were more godly. We were wonderful. And you're like, back in your day, when people of a different race couldn't use the same door, sit at the same counter, use the same water fountain. Yeah, we're so much more godly than everyone else. But sometimes it's always a generational thing. So we have to keep that in mind. Number two. So that's number one. We got to keep the generational differences and ask ourselves, is this just a generational difference or is there something to it? Number two, this is very, 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 very important. You see the depravity of man way before you had the advancement of technology, way before you had the rise of rock and roll, entertainment, Netflix, or whatever new thing is going to be the end that's going to destroy us. Let's remember this. Cain killed Abel before rock and roll. Cain killed Abel before MTV. Cain killed Abel before rap, before hip hop, before a cell phone, before a video game, before a movie, before Netflix, before anything. Because why? Because of depravity in the heart. So most of the issues that we always want to blame. This is what we have a tendency to do. We tend to make everything that's going to be the source of our problem. Like there's the source. The reason kids are messed up is because of MTV. The reason kids are messed up is because of Netflix. So if we protect them from, now I know MTV is a dated reference, but Netflix or TikTok or whatever the thing is that everyone's yelling and screaming about, that music, that musical artist, whoever it was in the 90s, Marilyn Manson, he's going to destroy all of our kids. Whoever, it's always someone and something. And it's always viewed that that's the source that's going to corrupt our kids. That's the thing that's going to destroy the generation. Let me make it very clear. There doesn't need to be any external source to corrupt your kid because your kid was born corrupted. Your kid was born dead in their trespasses and sin. Your kid was born a depraved sinner. Your child did not become a sinner because of external influence. Your child was born a sinner. Your child did not become a sinner by sinning. Your child sins because they are a sinner by nature. So many times Christians almost come at things from a very semi-Pelagian or a Pelagian view when Pelagius basically denied original sin and total depravity. You can go look at the debate between Pelagianism and Augustinianism. We could go all through all of those discussions. But I think sometimes Christians we see everything. That's it. That's going to be the thing that's going to take it. If we could get rid of that, if we could fix that, if we could stop that, if we could stop that, we'll save everything. And it's like, no. Let me remind you of this. God wiped out the entire world other than the people on the ark. He wiped out everything. Gone. Global flood. Destruction. All right. So, and think about it this way. He got rid of all the bad stuff. He got rid of all the liberals. He got rid of all the critical race theory. He got rid of all the bad Netflix movies. He got rid of all the bad music. He got rid of Kanye. He got rid of Drake. He got rid of everything. Just because they've released albums recently that has been streamed like a bazillion times. That's why I mentioned them. Okay. But whatever it is, it got rid of it. It got rid of it. There we go. The world is going to be fixed, right? We're going to have heaven on earth. And what happened? The people who got off the ark, guess what they got off the ark with? Their sinful nature. And did it take very long for everything to go wrong? How long before Noah walks out of the ark that we find him drunk with no clothes on? How long after the flood do you just start seeing sin and all kinds of horrible things happening? Why? Because guess what? You can wipe out everything on this planet. You can wipe out everything. You can shut down all television, all streaming, all music, all video games. You can take us all the way back to ancient times where we don't have all of this technological advancement and all this crazy stuff. And you know what you're still going to have? Sinful people who do ungodly things, and they're going to murder, and there's going to be sexual sin, and there's going to be perversion, and there's going to be idolatry, and there's going to be hatred, and there's going to be forgiveness, and there's going to be racism, and it's going to be everything. Why? Because it's the sin is inside of us. So on one hand, there is the generational thing. Oh, look at this generation. What is this generation doing? This generation is a mess. I can't understand their music. I don't understand their clothing. Why did they do that to their hair? Why are they wearing their pants that way? And it's just a bunch of old people saying, get off my yard. That drives me absolutely crazy. Older people literally make me sometimes want to go drive a car into a tree because it's just so... in my day, the music was better. Just stop with the old days were better than the new days stuff. Just stop that nonsense, okay? It's like, yeah, back in the olden days, the world was wonderful. I mean, you never would have had a Hitler back in the olden days where you exterminate 6 million people. That would never happen back in the olden days. Back in the olden days, nobody would ever own a human being as a piece of property and sell it. Never back in the olden days. Back in the olden days, never would you not allow a person to walk through the same door, use the same bathroom, or use the same water fountain. Never, based off the color of their skin. Never back in the olden days where everyone was wonderful. Come on now. Okay, come on. It's like, so we have the generational thing, and then we have this really mixed up idea that the source of corruption is something external to ourselves. The source of corruption is me. It's you. It's the human heart that is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. All right. So those are two major issues we have to talk about. But listen to me carefully. Sometimes people offering warnings. Yes, they may have that whole generational, old person yelling to get off my yard complex. They may have that going on. Yes, they may seem to have it wrong about where the source of corruption and sin is. They may have all of those things wrong, but somehow in the midst of all of that confusion, they still may have some validity to their warning. There still may be something to the warning that we should take heed to. And sometimes it's hard to hear the warning because of all of the nonsense that they're speaking, but there still could be a good warning. Still something they're telling us, hey, we need to pay attention to. So I want us to take heed to a warning we are about to hear in regards to technology. Now, they're going to put a lot of this as Satan, 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 Satan. And you know how I feel about that. Again, I think most of the issues is inside of us. So let me ask the question. All right. So we've looked at the old person problem. We've looked at the source problem when the source is really us. But let me ask you a question. I'm holding right here in my hand a cell phone. Do you think, now let's leave Satan out of this right now. Let's just leave Satan. Do you think the rise of technology, cell phones, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, just whatever source, whatever platform you want to consider. Do you think the rise of mobile devices, iPads, cell phones, and social media, do you think those things have been beneficial to the average Christian or detrimental? Forget age, we're not talking source, because the problem is inside of us. But if you take a sinful nature, hand them a cell phone. Now I'll make it very clear. The cell phone, to me, is the cell phone is not immoral. It's not godly. It's neutral, right? What I do with it. We talked about, if you've been listening to the live broadcast all day, earlier this morning, I gave you 10 Christian radio stations that you can download apps for your mobile device, and you can use your mobile device for that. You can use your mobile device to look at the curriculum that we make available for our Bible study exercises. You can listen to this podcast. There's so much you can do good with it. But I'm just curious, when it comes down to mobile devices and social media, do you think they've been a good thing or a bad thing for the average Christian? How much negative things have entered in their life? Now, I'm not blaming the technology. I'm blaming our use of it, because I think the problem is us. But just even not trying to get too specific here, just do you think that it's been a detrimental thing for you, for the people around you? So in other words, someone could offer a warning about technology. Maybe it come across as an old man telling you to get off the yard. Maybe they're placing it as the source of the problem than human depravity. Maybe they mix it all up, but maybe there's a warning there about technology that we should take heed to and ask ourselves, is this a bad thing or a good thing? Let me give you an example. At least in the 80s and at least a part of the 90s, it was very common to come across Christian families who said, no television in our home. We believe that's, now that may refer to it again as Satan's weapon. Basically, the TV was referred to by many to be Satan's devices. Now, I don't know how people viewed it in the 50s or 60s. I wasn't born, and I was too young in the 70s. And so in the 80s, I heard a lot of Christians like, nope, our family, and you would meet Christian kids and they're like, no, our family doesn't have a television. Like, you don't have a television. And I'd be like, you can't watch MTV. How are you living? Okay, because if there's anyone who watched like a bazillion hours of MTV, it was me. So, but the point is like, what is going on? But their family believed it was a device of Satan. Now, forget cell phones. We're talking the TV. The TV. Now, later on, it kind of morphed into, well, you can have a TV, but you cannot have a subscription to HBO. HBO is hell's box office. You cannot do that. So it kind of always fluctuated. Like, you can't have this, but you can have this. But there was a big fight that the TV was a bad thing. Now, you could ask yourself, what did the TV do for the average Christian? What did TV do for Christianity in general? Do you think Christians are better off by owning the television, 9,000 different things they can watch, or do you think they're worse off? Now, again, some of the warnings may have been inconsistency, hypocritical, foolish sounding, but could there have been some truth in the midst of all of that? Where would your Christian life be today if you never owned a television? Where would your Christian life be today, depending on your age, if you never owned a video game system? Where would your Christian life be today if you didn't have social media? Now, again, it's not the social media is not I want to make sure to realize whatever you did wrong on social media or I did wrong on social media, it was us who did it. It wasn't it. But it was did we see the danger to it? Now, these are important questions to think about. Now, here's what we're going to do. Again, on the way home, I was listening to Understanding the Times. I've played clips from this program a lot. You can subscribe to their podcast, Understanding the Times. They always talk about biblical prophecy in times. Sometimes I agree. Sometimes I think they're a million, sometimes I don't know what they're doing. But again, I love to be challenged with theological perspectives. And today was all about technology in the end times, technology in the end times, technology in the end times, how Satan is going to use technology to basically rebuild Babel, how Satan is going to use technology to destroy us. And I, when I was listening, again, I think I heard a little bit of that old person kind of going after a younger generation, kind of viewing it more as the source than the human depravity. But I think there may be some actually good stuff in it as well. So I'm gonna play this and I'm gonna break in a lot. But if you're listening live, throw in your thoughts at any time about any of this, because I would like to get your perspective here. All right, here we go. Are we ready? All right, this comes from Understanding the Times. It aired. I think the podcast is released Friday nights at like 10 or 11 p.m. It begins to air on radio, I think, on Saturdays and Sundays, typically on a lot of Christian radio stations. All right, here we go. And speaking of my cell phone's battery is dead, so I can't use it for any illustrations because it's dead. All right, so here we go. Are you ready? All right, thinking caps on. All right, it's 4:18 p.m. We've been on the air for 23 minutes. Let's jump in and see how far we can get through this.
What other devices and what is the psychological, emotional toll, the price that really comes with all this technology?
Let me answer your first question by reading a quote. The arrival of the smartphone has radically changed every aspect of teenagers' lives, from the nature of their social interactions to their mental health. These changes affected young people in every corner of the nation and every type of household. The trends appear among teens, both poor and rich, of every ethnic background, in cities, suburbs, and small towns. Where there are cell towers, there are teens living in their lives in their smartphones. I went to Nicaragua, a third world country. and you walk by every house, they have a big screen TV, they have a cell phone because the government subsidizes it. This is a global phenomenon, and the purpose is to break down national boundaries, cultural boundaries, and create a new ethos, a new culture that is united by basically pop culture. The end result is we have the loneliest generation. Our children are so lonely, they're so lost, and the end result, to answer that second question, is it's their souls.
And welcome to the program. Well, most of us have a love-hate relationship with technology. We know it can be used for good. It gets the gospel around the world, literally, to every continent with a click of a mouse. At the same time, it has a dark side. It is addictive. The content can be dark, can even be demonic. Well, my guest for the hour, Nathan Jones of Lamb Lion Ministries, says social media saturates today's culture. Adults, as well as youth of America and the world for that matter, have their eyes constantly on the various devices that bring them news, information, and most of all, entertainment. Devices.
Now, I have to just jump in here because, again, some of this could be just transferred. Like you could just transfer these very same words to what people were saying in regards to the television, right? That everyone's just watching the television. Everyone's just watching the television. They're spending their life watching the television, and it's going to make them lonely and depressed and all of the garbage that's coming in. And you used to hear preachers, garbage in, garbage out. Turn off the television. Stop going to the movie theaters. Well, we moved all past that. So now it's cell phones. So I just think sometimes we go from one technological device to another technological device, to one technological advancement to another technological advancement, yelling and screaming about the damage they're doing. But is it those devices or is it us? Now, again, I'm not saying that there's no dangers, but we'll listen to everything they have to say here. Here we go.
Turn people inward, fulfilling the Apostle Paul's perilous times characteristic, lovers of self. Nathan goes on to say they term photos taken of themselves selfies. The minions of the Antichrist spirit are enabled, he says, to use the devices that have so captured the minds and hearts, particularly of the youth, to benefit their nefarious work in the high places they occupy. They can bend and shape opinion in concert with the leftist mainstream media. Thus we have a nation divided, but more importantly, a people, even on a worldwide basis, captive to the spirit of Antichrist that wants to enslave them under the coming regime of the first beast of Revelation, chapter 13. Well, Nathan has contributed a chapter in the new Terry James book, Lawless, End Times War Against the Spirit of Antichrist, which we...
Okay, now stop right here. I always find it interesting that anytime you listen to any Christian program today, they got the left wing, liberal media. It's always got to be somehow we bring in the political terminology. Have you not? That's one of the, again, proofs to me of the political hijacking of the church is everything. Like we never talk about the right wing media. No. It's always left. Left is bad. Right is good. And now the name of the book is Lawlessness. In fact, let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Because if I can, I will just add it to the Theology Central Book Club. And then everyone who is a part of it will get a notification here in a second. See if I can find it. Lawless. Let me see here. No, okay, there's a lot of lawless books here. Let me back that up and get the full name of it. Yeah. Okay, there's a lot of books named Lawless, so that's not going to help me. Let's back this up just a little bit, see if we can get this added. All right, here we go.
Regime of the first beast of Revelation, chapter 13. Well, Nathan has contributed a chapter in the new Terry James book, Lawless, End Times War Against the Spirit of Antichrist, which we carry, and his chapter is titled Devices in These End of Days. A reminder that this book has 17 contributors. And
okay, I found it. I found the book, Lawless, End Time War Against the Spirit of Antichrist. It was released October the 15th, 2020. And I'm going to add it right now to the Theology Central Book Club. There you go. If you want to read it, again, I'm not saying I agree with everything about its eschatology, but you can read it. 17 contributors to the book. You can look at it. You can see what you think. Again, just like letting you know what's going on in the world of Christianity. But what we're going to listen to here is back to this warning that they're going to give about technology. Again, it may be placed in terminology and ideas that carry all kinds of error, but is there any truth in any of this that we need to consider and take heed for ourselves? All right, let's get back to it.
It's available in our store, in our newsletters, or you can call us. Nathan Jones, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you. It's always a great blessing to be with you and your audience.
Listen, you love technology and utilize every aspect of it to spread the gospel. So I think we ought to state right up front that neither you nor I are anti-technology. We recognize its dark side.
Oh, absolutely. I've been in technology for 20 years now. I'm the Internet Evangelist with Lamb and Lion Ministries. But before that, I was in web development, design, and digital marketing. For 20 years, I've been championing the cause of Internet evangelism to churches and ministries. Until the COVID virus, a lot on deaf ears, people not realizing the opportunity that the Internet provides of reaching the world with the gospel. I'm very passionate about that, yes, but you're right. There's actually a very dark side to it, and Satan is using technology to continue to build this new Tower of Babel and work towards his one world kingdom.
Yes, exactly. And I want to emphasize that technology, it keeps us informed, it keeps us connected to people we care about, but it offers the clickbaiters, the identity thieves, the cyber bullies, and what you bring out, Nathan, in the book and in your interviews is the young, as you've pointed out, and I think it's obvious to just about every listener, younger people become detached and they live only electronically. Ultimately, your point is this is setting the stage for the Antichrist, and I do want to talk about that in this hour, but let's just...
Now, like you hear again, that's setting the stage for the Antichrist. I've heard that 9 billion times in my Christian life. Everything's setting the stage for the Antichrist. Literally everything. Movies, everything has been threatened to be the thing setting the stage for the Antichrist. I don't think there's not any advancement that's ever come along that some Christian will think, that's it, that's setting the stage. Sometimes Christians have to realize if everything is setting the stage of the Antichrist, then at some point your words just become, everything is setting the stage for the Antichrist. Okay, well then at some point then, okay, you're not saying anything that you haven't said 900 million times. So, all right, again, what I want to try to still see the truthfulness of some of the warnings. Now, again, just remember, they just want young people. So this is older people talking about the young generation that they can't understand because the young generation walks around all day long looking at their phone. All right. Now, again, that is a generational difference. Am I saying that it's wonderful that young people are looking at their phone all the time? I'm not saying it's wonderful. I'm saying that sometimes our issue with it is more of a generational difference than an actual in other words, it's just a generational difference. It's just the way one generation does something versus the other generation. When I was younger, I should say, because I don't know the age of everyone, the older generation are like, all you do is sit around watching television. All you do is sit there watching those music videos, and that music's going to rot your brain. It's always like the older generation always says that about the younger generation. It always does. Now, I'm not saying that there's never any validity in what's being said. Sometimes I think that we have to try to look for the truth of the warning beyond some of the language that just demonstrates a generational difference. Let's go further into this.
Let's go back here for a minute to dealing with the young people because they've become detached. They live only electronically. And you even say that some young people are on the brink of a mental health crisis because of that. Explain what you mean.
There's been no other generation in the past that has been subjected to as many distractions as millennials and Generation Zs of today. Generation Zs in particular have lived their entire lives never having known what life was like before being connected 24/7 to the Internet and their mobile devices. In my research for this chapter, I found Jean Twenge. She's a professor of psychology in San Diego State, and she labeled millennials and Gen Zs, and those are people born from 1980 and afterwards, as Generation Me or iGen or the distracted generation, because they now have these devices that continually keep them distracted. Matter of fact, 90% of teachers that were surveyed said that it's creating a short attention span generation. They can't do their homework. They can't have critical thinking skills. It's created this terrible loneliness. I have children that are Generation Zs. In other words, they were born 1998 and later. For them and their friends, you see increasingly homebound. They're jobless. They're dislocated. They're lonely. They're falling into lethargy. They're physically weak. They're depressed. They're taking painkillers. And they're 35% more likely to commit suicide than previous generations. And
Okay, now again, I'm trying to listen to these warnings, and I'm not saying that there aren't warnings to be considered here, but at the same time, it's hard for me not to hear this in light of all the things I heard in the 80s. In the 80s, I don't know what was going on with the suicide rates at the time, but there were all these books and Christian leaders like, young people are killing themselves, suicide, suicide. I remember going to a big church in Abilene, and there was this whole thing about how many young people are killing themselves. And guess what the culprit was? Rock and roll. Rock and roll is leading people. And then they would quote lyrics, I think a Suicide Solution. I think that's the name of the song by Ozzy Osbourne. I'd have to go back and check. And some other songs. And these songs are leading people to kill themselves. These songs are leading people to kill themselves. It's the music. It's the music. It's the music. And that this culture is so distracted, and all they do is watch MTV, and all they do is listen to their music, and all they do is play video games, and all they do is go hang out in the mall. This generation, they're distracted. They can't think. They got short attention spans. I heard that all throughout the 80s. And guess what? Many of those in that generation who grew up with all of that, they went on to be lawyers, writers, doctors, philosophers, preachers, etc., 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 etc. So again, I'm not saying some of those issues don't contribute, but many of those issues, there could be a number, it's the cause and effect argument. Well, okay, we have younger people committing suicide at I think he's at a 30% increase. So it has to be because they spend all day on their cell phone. Now, how do you get the cause and effect? Could it be a number of other factors? Could it be? Could it be anything else? I'm not saying that the cell phone all day is healthy. By no means. There's a lot of studies that would demonstrate that it's not. But always cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. Just make sure we remind ourselves, people were committing suicide in the 80s. No internet for the kids. No, whether it was in a university somewhere, but you get the idea of no one had the internet. No one had a cell phone. We didn't have all of the supposed things that cause, and kids were killing themselves. I went to school with someone who hung himself, right? I remember getting off the bus with him, and he said goodbye, and didn't quite understand why he said goodbye. And then I figured it out when I saw the ambulance go by. He hung himself. Went home, went to the back, and hung himself, all right? Now, that I guarantee you, the reason he hung himself wasn't because of music. It wasn't because of MTV. It wasn't because of video games. It's because of the horrible, horrible family life he was living in. I tried to kill myself. Had nothing to do with music. Had nothing to do with the books I was reading. No, had to do with everything that went horribly wrong in my family life, the death of my mother. There can be so many factors that can lead to depression and suicide. So it just cause and effect. I always get very, here's the cause. Here's the cause. And again, it's the older generation looking at the younger generation going, see all of their problems? It's the cell phone. It's the cell phone and social media. That's doing it. Or could be the breakdown of the family structure unit. Could it be that? Could be. We could look at a complete, basically secular worldview that has swept across most of the generation. So then what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? Where did you come from? What are you? I mean, there are so many factors that go into it, but I'm not saying that it doesn't contribute. I'm not saying it doesn't contribute, but let's go on with the other things he has to say here.
Socially, 44% of high school seniors as of 2015 haven't even been on a date before. As this generation gets more and more connected to their devices, which supposedly connect us with other people, they're actually being disconnected from society, and it's having great adverse effects on their psychology.
Yeah, I want to build on that. It happens to be a clip of you in an interview. Some of these young people are ending up with no social skills. Their only interest is devices.
When it comes to Bible prophecy, people tend to come to me for the technology aspect of it because I have 20 years in the field of internet evangelism, as well as the technology side of it. Terry approached me saying, well, we're all looking at different ways how Satan is trying to build this new world order. Could you approach from the technological side, particularly devices? And I'll just tell you straight up front, I think that all of technology is working towards reprogramming humanity to a new ethos and a new culture, which is Satan's, to build this new world order. And particularly they do it through digital media, particularly the cell phone.
Okay.
I'll tell you, when Terry approached me, I was at a restaurant. I saw a family of about 20 people. They had put all these chairs together, and every single person on that table was on their cell phone. Not a person was talking to them. I sat there at my table, and I watched them eat. I don't even know why they were at a restaurant together. It's become the only way that Gen Zs, when I talk Gen Zs, I talk about my children's generation. It's born 1998 to 2015.
Okay.
The millennials are 1980 to 97. And they have grown up with technology. They don't remember a day where they weren't hooked up to the internet in some way. As I began researching for this, you found out that...
Now, this is where now we're getting into some very serious issues. I agree that sometimes it doesn't matter where you go. Nobody looks at anybody. Everyone's grabbed the phone. I've been at restaurants before, and you'll see two people. You don't know if it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, doesn't matter, husband and wife. They're sitting at the restaurant, and they're both looking at their phones. I've seen that. You've seen that. What in the world is going on? Now, that's new technology. Now, is it the technology, or is there a danger inherent in the technology and our inability to control said technology? Now, I don't care what it is. I don't care what it is. You can go back to video game systems, right? I've talked about this in my Christian life. There were different times in my Christian life I'm like, nope, no video game system, because it was going to dominate all my time. And especially as the video games became more and more advanced, it takes forever to accomplish the whole game. The games have a beginning. Many times they have a storyline all the way through it. You have all of these quests, and you got to do this, you got to do that, and then ultimately you have to defeat the sometimes used in the gaming terminology, the boss at the end, the big boss, the final boss, and then you win the game, and then there's closing credits and everything. You got to be dedicated and disciplined to play all through. Now, the better you are at the game, the faster you can complete it. At how many hours you're willing to put in. If you're willing to put in 4 or 5 hours per day, you can probably knock out the game in a couple of days. If you're not willing to dedicate that much time, it may take you a month or 2 months. And I started realizing this is too time consuming. This is going to take so much of my time. I can't do it. If I have this, it's going to take too much of my time. I've got other things to do. I don't believe the technology was at fault. It was my flesh wanted to do that more than do other things. So I said no. So there's always, no matter what it is, there's always those things that can have a negative impact on us. I don't know if it's a satanic plot to overthrow the world. I think sometimes technology just advances. We come in contact with that technology, and what we do with it, usually we end up doing things that we shouldn't do with it because of our sinful nature. Whatever we pick up, we're going to find a way to use it in an incorrect way. We're going to use it in a way to turn us from God, not turn us to God. We're going to use it in a way to feed the flesh, please the eyes, please the flesh, please our pride, our ego. That's what we're going to do with it, because it's just built into us because of our sinful nature. But it is crazy to see that, okay, so everyone's got their phone. Everyone's looking at their phone. Everyone's looking at the phone. Now, again, sometimes that bothers us from a generational perspective, but it should raise the question to everyone, what in the world how much time am I, and I mentioned this morning, how much time are you spending on your phone, and what are you doing on it? It's such an amazing device that you can use to listen to sermons, theology. You can go to, let me see, what's it called? I don't know if I have it on this iPad. I think I have it on my other iPad. iTunes U. iTunes U. It's an app. iTunes U. You know what that app is? iTunes U? It's an app just filled with lectures from universities all across the United States of America. You've got Harvard, you've got MIT. You've got you name it, from all around the world. You've got universities all over the place. You Boston College. You can just go on and on and on and on. LSU, Notre Dame, and you can just listen to lectures. That's right there on your device. It's free. How many people utilize it for that? No, none. No, because we use it usually for the most frivolous thing possible. So I don't see it as a satanic attack more than it's just the depravity inside of us. Again, the spiritual war that we fight is rarely a war with the externals. It's the war that's within us. It's an internal war. Now, external things can help feed that, but you have to then know yourself and know where your issue is. But let's continue.
Gen Z, my children's generation, spends 6.5 hours a day connected. They prefer to connect to people over social media rather than in person. So they are now isolated onto their devices. The end result is that we now have a generation that the suicide rate has gone up 35% amongst our children. They're isolated, they're lonely. 44% of seniors in high school now haven't even gone on a date. They don't know how to do it. I've watched my own children struggle socially with people because they'd rather talk to people over their devices. And the idea goes back to the Garden of Eden, where Satan used this 5-step strategy. He wanted to distract people away from God.
Okay, now this is interesting. So he says this goes back to the garden. Now let me make sure we understand this. If it goes back to the garden, no technology was in play there. And he's going to give this 5-fold strategy. Let's see if you can pick out the 5-fold strategy. And you can ask yourself, I can see how that can work. Let's see if we can pick out 5. Because when I was listening to this on the way home, I don't think I ever got all 5. I think I got 4 of them. This is going to be repeated. It's going to repeat it here. Then after they go from this clip back to the actual interview, he's going to repeat it again. I'm going to back this up just a little bit. 5-fold strategy from Satan, going back to the garden, all right? And he's going to connect this to technology. Let's see if we can find out this 5-fold strategy.
The Garden of Eden, where Satan used this 5-step strategy. He wanted to distract people away from God and what.
Okay, it seems like number 1, I'm going to open up my notes here. I'm going to open up my note tab using technology. Okay, I'm going to open this. Distract from God. All right, distract from God. Now let's just think this through. Anything can be a distraction from God. It doesn't have to be technology. It could be a chessboard. It could be checkers. It could be quilting. It could be hiking. It could be camping. It could be hunting. It could be cars. Anything can be used to distract us. And here's the reason why. We are easily distracted by things taking our attention away from God, because deep down we are lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. That's in our DNA. That's in our sinful nature, right? So let's back this up again. Right? He goes through these so quick that sometimes it's hard to pick these up. I think the first one is distraction from God. Let's see if we can pick up the second one.
I've watched my own children struggle socially with people because they'd rather talk to people over their devices. And the idea goes back to the Garden of Eden, where Satan used this 5-step strategy. He wanted to distract people away from God and what was important. Then to focus on self.
All right. Number 2, focus on self. Focus on self. All right. So number 1, distract from God. Number 2, focus on self. Now, again, if that's Satan's strategy, the sinful nature already accomplished it. The very essence of the sin nature is selfishness. This morning, we were talking about the sinful nature, I think in Sunday school, and then between Sunday school and the Sunday morning sermon, one of the young kids in the church, he said, I want, and he wanted candy. I don't know what he wanted, but he was like, I want. And I stopped and I made a joke to everyone. There's a perfect illustration of our sin nature. I want. We are born focused on ourselves. The very essence of sin is I. The very essence of sin is selfishness. This has nothing to do with technology. This has everything to do with that's just what we are. I didn't need the internet to be focused on self. I didn't need MTV to be focused on self. I didn't need cable TV to be focused on self. I didn't need anything. You could put me in a monastery and I still would find a way to be focused on self, because that's the essence of our sinful nature. Now, the question is, whatever we have, it could be a Kindle. I read lots and lots of comic books because I just love doing so many different things. My interests are so varied. So I think it's Comixology, if I remember the name of the app, where you can basically just subscribe to comic books in a digital format. And it's got this cool feature and the way it takes you from panel to panel. It's just awesome. And on an iPad Pro, I mean, there's nothing better. Okay, I can sit there for hours reading them. Now, think about it. Whether the comic book contains any good, I mean, some comic books today, you can't read them because they're basically pornographic. So that's a whole different story. Okay. So you got to make sure it's not a comic book rated for mature audiences only because you're getting into some really messed up stuff. But if it's just a normal comic book with hopefully a very good story, they can distract from God because you're doing that instead of focusing on God. And you're focusing on self in the sense that you're reading the story, but you're doing it for your own pleasure, your own entertainment, and your own. So it can be anything. When I was a kid, because I loved playing sports, because I was extremely competitive and I wanted to be the best at everything, I could spend a Saturday on a basketball court and be there 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. Literally all day, just playing basketball over and over and over. Who wants to play next? One-on-one, playing teams, full court, half court, you name it. Playing baseball, playing football, you name it. Well, guess what? That distracted me from God. Now, I was out there. You could argue, well, it was healthy because I was running around playing a sport. And guess what? I was focused on self because the team I was playing, I didn't care about them. I wanted to destroy them. So there you have it. See, didn't need technology. This is just a part of our sinful nature. Now, Satan may utilize that and bring things to distract us, but I don't think it requires Satan's involvement. Whatever we build as humans, whatever we create, whatever we bring forth, it's going to distract from God most likely, and it's going to focus on self. All right, let's see if we can get the third one here. Let's back this up again. Here we go.
Because they'd rather talk to people over their devices. And the idea goes back to the Garden of Eden, where Satan used this 5-step strategy. He wanted to distract people away from God and what was important, then to focus on self, then to break people's relationships apart.
All right, number 3, break people's relationships apart. Break people's relationships apart. All right, now again, read your Bible. Way before technology comes on the scene, people's relationships were being broken apart. I mean, you're in Genesis, just jump from the garden, right? Just go there. Oh, Joseph and his brother. Oh, Cain and Abel. Joseph and his brothers. How many relationship issues do you find in the book of Genesis? Just take the book of Genesis. How many relationship issues do you find in the book of Genesis? No technology, no cell phones, nothing. How many relationship issues? Just think of throughout the Bible. Go from Genesis to the end of the Old Testament. How many times where you have a story where there were either relationship issues between individuals, between families, where there was war, there was division, there was fighting, over and over and over, because again, human beings are selfish to the core. It's depravity. Now, you can ask yourself, wait a minute, let's say technology. Can technology be used to distract us from God? Absolutely. If you don't use it to bring you closer to God, it's going to distract you from God. Can it be used to focus on yourself? Everything can. And can it lead to breaking people's relationships apart? I think all social media does is break people's relationships apart with other people, because all we seem to be able to do on social media is fight, argue, debate. So yeah, then you can ask yourself, okay, maybe this is not worth it. Maybe this is detrimental to me. All right, let's go back. Let's see. Now, those are 3. Let's see if we can get the last 2. I'm going to back this up a couple. Here we go. One more time.
Over the old landline phone, which, by the way, some of us still have. Why are you?
Okay, wait a minute. We went the wrong way there. Okay, now I got to figure out where we were. Let's see here. Where were we? We went the wrong direction. Oh, boy. Okay, here we go. I don't know if we're going to be able to find it. All right, here we go. Let's see if we can find it.
Antichrist that wants to enslave them under the coming regime of the first beast of Revelation, chapter 13. Well, Nathan has contributed a chapter in the new Terry James book, Lawless, End Time
I know we went back a little too far, but instead of trying to find, I'm just going to play it back out so we can put it all back in context. Here we go.
There's a war against the spirit of Antichrist, which we carry, and his chapter is titled Devices in These End of Days. A reminder that this book has 17 contributors, and it's available in our store, in our newsletters, or you can call us. Nathan Jones, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you. Always a great blessing to be with you and your audience.
Listen, you love technology and utilize every aspect of it to spread the gospel. So I think we ought to state right up front that neither you nor I are anti-technology. We recognize its dark side.
Oh, absolutely. I've been in technology for 20 years now. I'm the Internet Evangelist with Lamb and Lion Ministries. But before that, I was in web development, design, and digital marketing. For 20 years, I've been championing the cause of Internet evangelism to churches and ministries. Until the COVID virus, a lot on deaf ears, people not realizing the opportunity that the Internet provides of reaching the world with the gospel. I'm very passionate about that, yes, but you're right. There's actually a very dark side to it, and Satan is using technology to continue to build this new Tower of Babel and work towards his one world kingdom.
Yes, exactly. And I want to emphasize that technology, it keeps us informed, it keeps us connected to people we care about, but it offers the clickbaiters, the identity thieves, the cyber bullies, and what you bring out, Nathan, in the book and in your interviews is the young, as you've pointed out, and I think it's obvious to just about every listener, younger people become detached and they live only electronically. Ultimately, your point is this is setting the stage for the Antichrist, and I do want to talk about that in this hour. But let's just go back here for a minute to dealing with the young people because they've become detached, they live only electronically. And you even say that some young people are on the brink of a mental health crisis because of that. Explain what you mean.
There's been no other generation in the past that has been subjected to as many distractions as millennials and Generation Zs of today. Generation Zs in particular have lived their entire lives never having known what life was like before being connected 24/7 to the Internet and their mobile devices. In my research for this chapter, I found Jean Twenge. She's a professor of psychology in San Diego State, and she labeled millennials and Gen Zs, and those are people born from 1980 and afterwards, as Generation Me or iGen or the distracted generation because they now have these devices that continually keep them distracted. Matter of fact, 90% of teachers that were surveyed said that it's creating a short attention span generation. They can't do their homework. They can't have critical thinking skills. It's created this terrible loneliness. I have children that are Generation Zs. In other words, they were born 1998 and later. For them and their friends, you see increasingly homebound. They're jobless. They're dislocated. They're lonely. They're falling into lethargy. They're physically weak. They're depressed. They're taking painkillers. And they're 35% more likely to commit suicide than previous generations. And socially, 44% of high school seniors as of 2015 haven't even been on a date before. As our generation gets more and more connected to their devices, which supposedly connect us with other people, they're actually being disconnected from society, and it's having great adverse effects on their psychology.
Yeah, I want to build on that. It happens to be a clip of you in an interview. Some of these young people are ending up with no social skills. Their only interest is devices.
When it comes to Bible prophecy, people tend to come to me for the technology aspect of it because I have 20 years in the field of Internet evangelism as well as the technology side of it. Terry approached me saying, well, we're all looking at different ways how Satan is trying to build this new world order. Could you approach from the technological side, particularly devices? And I'll just tell you straight up front, I think that all of technology is working towards reprogramming humanity to a new ethos and a new culture, which is Satan's, to build this new world order. And particularly they do it through digital media, particularly the cell phone.
Okay.
I'll tell you, when Terry approached me, I was at a restaurant. I saw a family of about 20 people. They had put all these chairs together, and every single person on that table was on their cell phone. Not a person was talking to them. I sat there at my table, and I watched them eat. I don't even know why they were at a restaurant together. It's become the only way that Gen Zs, when I talk Gen Zs, I talk about my children's generation. It's born 1998 to 2015. Okay. The millennials are 1980 to 97. And they have grown up with technology. They don't remember a day where they weren't hooked up to the Internet in some way. As I began researching for this, you found out that Gen Z, my children's generation, spends 6.5 hours a day connected. They prefer to connect to people over social media rather than in person. So they are now isolated onto their devices. The end result is that we now have a generation that the suicide rate has gone up 35% amongst our children. They're isolated, they're lonely. 44% of seniors in high school now haven't even gone on a date. They don't know how to do it. I've watched my own children struggle socially with people because they'd rather talk to people over their devices. And the idea goes back to the Garden of Eden, where Satan used this 5-step strategy. He wanted to distract people away from God and what was important, then to focus on self, then to break people's relationships apart, and then divide humanity. And that's
all right. Then the last one there is then divide humanity. Then divide humanity. All right. So number 1, distract. Number 2, focus on self. Number 3, break people's relationships apart. Number 4, then divide humanity. Now, he said 5. I don't know if he's going to mention 5 in a minute. Hopefully he will, because I don't want to try to back it up again and then mess up and have to go that far back and you have to listen to everything again. But that put it in its fuller context without any interruption. So maybe that was a beneficial thing. Now, again, divide humanity. Read your Bible. Is the Bible filled with division? Division in the church, division outside the church, division between Jew and Gentile, division. No technology was needed. No technology was there. No internet, no movies, no rock and roll, and go on and on. Because it's inside of us. We find a way to divide humanity. We find a way to do so. We find a way to oppress and defeat and push down and use and manipulate people, whether it's a division between rich and poor, whether it's a division between whatever the case may be, things will divide us because that's what we do. Now let's see if he offers a 5th one here.
That's where we're at. But the idea is that once you divide them, they're easy to indoctrinate, and then you build this new world order, this new culture, and this new ethos, which is secular humanism, and it's postmodernism.
He doesn't really say, I guess the last one is indoctrinate. I guess. I'm going to just say indoctrinate, I guess is what he's going at. And he doesn't really connect it back to the passage in Genesis. We could look at it, but you can look at these things. Distract from God. Again, that everything can distract us from God. Everything, anything and everything. Idolatry, wealth, anything can distract us from God. Focus on self. We're born with that. Break people's relationships apart. That's a result of our sinful nature. Divide humanity and indoctrinate. Well, put it this way. There's always a new idea to indoctrinate us with. And that indoctrination can come anywhere. It can come in a comic book. It can come in a novel. It can come anywhere. It can come around sitting around a campfire, telling stories. People are putting forth their perspective and their philosophy. It could come back sitting in a outside with a bunch of philosophers together, giving their philosophies. There's always been some form of indoctrination wherever. Now, you could argue that technology brings you more perspectives, more ideas coming at you than ever before. You can be exposed to more ideas. But again, is that the technology's fault? Or is it because we haven't trained ourselves and trained young people and trained people in the church and how to process different ideas, how to consider them, how to break them down, how to deal with them, how to engage different ideas? Is it a failure of equipping? Because the church is supposed to equipping people that are not tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. So is it a failure of teaching people critical thinking skills? I don't know. Let's continue. We're already at an hour, so we're not going to get very much further, but let's see if we can just get a couple more minutes in.
And that's what's controlling the new generation today.
Nathan, that was a very interesting clip that I just played of you. In your chapter, you look very carefully at the smartphone. Just about every listener right now has a smartphone. And you call it a mind-altering device, and I would agree with you, but every listener who has a smartphone, they're not looking at it as some kind of a mind-altering device. It's a convenience to them. That's all. They're out running around. They got to call somebody, and it's a tremendous convenience over the old landline phone, which, by the way, some of us still have. Why are you calling it a mind-altering device?
Satan always has had this strategy, and as I explained in that clip there, it's a 5-part strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back to read Genesis 3 and read how Satan tempts Adam and Eve, and it's fascinating because he's got a goal, he's got a purpose, and you can read about that in Isaiah 14, and that's where Satan says, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will also sit on the mountain of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north, and I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High. So knowing what Satan's goal is to replace God and receive the worship that God has unto himself. He tried to overthrow God in heaven and got sent down to earth, and now confined to earth, he's trying to turn mankind away from God to worship himself. You can look at all of human history as Satan's attempt to get mankind to turn to him and worship him. And he did that through this 5-step strategy. He first distracted Adam and Eve. He said, "Well, shall you not eat of every tree of the garden?" And it got Eve, particularly, who was in the conversation there, distracted with the things that they can never possess. And that's one thing that the smartphone technology does, is it continually distracts us. It continually shows us a different look, more stuff you can buy. Great.
Let me make it very clear. That could be applied to the written word. Walk into a library. I used to spend hours and hours in the library as a kid, all right? I used to take a bus to the library and spend half of the day there. I used to spend who knows how many hours. There was a little shop. I guess it was like a drugstore. I don't know what you called it. It was a little shop there on, what street was that? South 7th Street. I used to ride my bike there, and they had a soda fountain there that you could get, like, malts and shakes and a vanilla Coke and whatever, like a little with stools you could sit on and get them. It was like leftover from the 50s. I don't know what it was. It looked like something from a 1950s movie. And then right there was a stand of comic books, right? The little thing, that metal rack, and then you could turn it around. I used to sit there on the floor with a stack of comic books. I'd buy me something to drink, and I would spend they never got mad at me. Now, I would always buy a bunch of comic books, but there was all kinds of different philosophies and ideas right there. In the library, there were different philosophies and different ideas. Thousands and thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of pages of different ideas and philosophies. So there's always been things like that. There's always, but see, we're like, oh, that was wholesome, going to the library and reading all of those books. Was it? Because it was different ideas. Many philosophies completely contrary to a biblical viewpoint. Same thing in the comic books, right? So, but back then we were yelling and screaming like, these books, don't read these books. Remember Christians burning records and burning books? Oh, let's not go back to that nonsense, okay? But yeah, so, hey, don't read. Remember how the Harry Potter books were going to destroy the entire world and bring it all down, and we're all going to go up in flames, and all of our kids were going to be, practicing witchcraft and sacrificing cats at midnight because of Harry Potter books. There's always something that we're like, this is it. This is going to be the end of us. It's going to destroy us. Now, I'm not saying, again, that there aren't warnings about technology. But when you listen to some of that, it's like, they're talking about the smartphone. That could be applied to so many other things. All right. Now, let's see if he gets us to 5. He didn't get us, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess he got so we think indoctrinate was the one he gave. Let's see. He's going to go through these again really quick.
Trips, a new world that you could have but can never really possess. And so it keeps us focused then on ourselves, which is his second step. And you can see in Satan in Genesis 3:4. So you will not surely die, for God knows that in day you eat of it, your eyes will be open, you will be like God, knowing good from evil. Eve then, instead of putting her focus on Adam and God, became inward-focused and self-focused. And then, of course, she ate the apple, and Adam willingly did, and that's his third step, to break people apart, break the relationship between man and woman apart, break the relationship between God and man apart, and even the animal kingdom. Animals had to be killed so there would be clothes for Adam and Eve and us today. So those relationships kept breaking apart. And you can see that Satan is always a divider, which is his fourth step. He's constantly trying to keep mankind broken apart and divided and fighting so they cannot unify and achieve the things that he wants to achieve, which again is the worship of self. His final step is to take all those disparaging, broken, conflicting relationships and then reprogram into a new ethos, a global religion, which is humanism, which we know in the tribulation will lead to eventually Satanism, and set up his kingdom where he is the center of worship. And during the tribulation time period ahead, he will achieve that.
Okay, so the last one is reprogram, I guess, into a new ethos, world religion kind of concept. So here's now I would challenge you to go listen to the whole podcast, Understanding the Times podcast. Go listen to it all, subscribe to it, because it's an interesting conversation. I will just say this: I think every Christian has to ask themselves these questions. The cell phone technology, is it helping or is it hurting? Is it helping or is it hurting? Now, there's a very good chance that even if you got rid of the technology, some of the same issues would manifest themselves in a different way. Now, I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm saying if something is hurting you, then you have to definitely check it. But I'm just saying you can get rid of everything, and some of the issues are there because the issue is not in the cell phone in your hand. It's the heart in your body. It's your depravity. The issue is not the television. It's you. The issue is not the movie theater. It's you. The issue is not, it's you. And we always, I think, want to point external instead of internal. That's my thought. But you can listen to it. They make a lot of, discussions about technology. They move quickly through the cell phone, and then they go to basically surveillance that, the phone is watching you and listening to you, and they can track you, and they go into those directions. But you can listen to it, understanding the times. There you have it. You can tell me what you think of that fivefold strategy. But I wanted to at least throw all of this out on this Sunday afternoon, now fast approaching Sunday evening. But we've been on the air for 1 hour and 9 minutes. So I'm going to have to stop. So we'll stop right there. Let me know your thoughts and email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. All right. Everyone have a great evening, great week. God bless.